So, good morning everyone. My name is Sebastien Arbogast, and as you guessed by the pronunciation of the name, I'm French. Sorry about that. And I'm going to talk to you about Lean Startup for Developers today. But before I get started, I would like to know a little bit more about you guys, so that should be easy to see the trends. So first of all, who is a developer? Okay, I'm in the right conference, I didn't miss the building, that's cool. So maybe some of you are consultants or working for software factories, stuff like that. So chances are you're not building your own project, you're working for other companies, for other projects, and sometimes it's projects you don't even believe in, that don't speak to you directly, that don't solve your own problems, and decisions are taken for you that don't make sense to you somehow. And sometimes you even work with people who don't really understand technology and what it really involves, and so can be frustrated. And some of you might even be bored, need more challenges, and you are desperate to be seen as an executing worker when in fact you really see yourself as a craftsman. Do I get the picture right, or? Okay, look, by the look of a few faces, I think I'm not completely mistaken. Okay, among those who are developers, so that's pretty much everyone, who has already dreamt of creating their own startup? Show of hands. Okay, about half, I'd say. And so yeah, probably you can see the problems at work, you can see the solutions that are proposed that really don't fit you well, and as I said, well, it's not your project. You would like your own baby, your own thing to work on. And also you feel like you have this great power, okay, the power to give orders to the machine, to make it do what you want it to do. And it's a great power, so it comes with great responsibility. That's Spider-Man stuff. And you know that you have to do something about it, something smarter, and something that, yeah, really speaks to you. Among those who said that they dreamt, at least once, to create their own startup, who took action? Who did it? 1, 2, okay. So probably you saved a few months to get some time aside to start your own prototype, or you worked part-time for a while to do it. Maybe you even found an investor to get the ball rolling. And yeah, in other words, you follow the white rabbit down the rabbit hole. And among those two, who is still working on their startup? 1.5. Okay. So yeah, probably now that you're an entrepreneur, you understand that it's a marathon, not a sprint, and you realize that it's not just about the technology, it's also about management, about motivation, and about perseverance and so on. And yeah, it's tough. It's a tough job. So, big question. Why are you here this morning? Let's talk about the difference between those who said that they had dreamt of doing it once, that's about half of the room, and those who actually did it too. There's a big difference there, okay? We're going to talk about that because those who actually did it, some of them are still working on it, some of them are stopped or almost, and yeah, most of the time this is what people are most interested in, is how do I avoid failure? How do I prevent myself from failing? And the lean startup stuff, it's often sold as a way to avoid failure. And if that's what you're expecting, I'm sorry, but no. Think again. That's not what we're going to talk about today. The first thing I would like to talk about is this difference between those who said they would like to do it and those who tried. Well, first of all, it's really important to acknowledge the fact that entrepreneurship is not for everyone. As I said, it's not just about the technology. you also need some qualities and skills that are very hard to learn. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's very hard. And it's really important to acknowledge that because, yeah, it's not for everyone. But in my experience, the best way I've found to know if you have what it takes is to try. Because sometimes those skills, you have them, but you don't know about it. They're just buried under layers and layers of corporate bullshit and stuff like that. So it's very hard to know if you have it until you try. And so the next question is, how do I try safely somehow? Let's talk about what's holding you back. What's preventing you from jumping ahead and doing it? Usually when I have 2 or 3 hours for this presentation, I ask people and so on, but here I start to see a few trends and a few common answers. So let's go over typical answers to that question. The first thing, I lack the $1 million idea. The myth of the $1 million idea. In the news, in the movies, you often hear that big startups started with a very simple idea, for those who have seen The Social Network and that kind of shit. This is not the truth, okay? It's a myth, really. And the problem with that myth is that it triggers another one, which is the myth of secrecy. If all it takes to create a great startup is a great idea, then this idea, you have to protect it at all costs, okay? Don't talk about it to no one. And if you talk about it to someone, make them sign an NDA. Wrong. Wrong, okay? This is really critical to understand that those are myths and that you need to take the other way around and actually talk about your idea to as many people as possible. Because you have more to lose keeping it to yourself than talking about it. And don't be afraid about people stealing your ideas. There are plenty of reasons why they won't. Well, first of all, because your idea is just that, an idea, it's worthless. What really matters is execution. So if you go back again to this myth about The Social Network, the Winklevoss brothers had more financial means than Zuckerberg. And yet he's the one who did it. Execution matters, okay? So ideas are worthless. And second of all, by asking people to sign an NDA, you're actually cutting yourself from feedback, from very valuable insights about things that you might not know. So it's very important to stay humble with your idea and consider that, yeah, you actually have everything to gain to talk about it with as many people as possible. Second answer, I have an idea, but it already exists. Again, another myth, the myth of the first comer advantage. There are plenty of examples, including the biggest ones, of businesses that look a lot like something that already exists. And that doesn't make them fail. Quite the contrary. Again, the idea is nothing. If I often take this image. Is there any firemen in the room? No? Okay. To make a fire, you need three things. You need a source of heat, you need something to burn, and you need something to burn in. So something to burn might be wood, something to burn in might be the air, okay, oxygen, and you need a source of heat. Usually it's a sparkle, a match, whatever. Well, ideas are like matches. You can have your match in your hand, it's going to burn quick, and if you don't have something to light fire to, if you don't have ambient air, it's absolutely worthless, okay? So really, again, this is about the idea being worthless. And the fact that it already exists is actually a good sign. If it does, I'm going to say something very clear here. There is no original good idea. If it's completely original, it's probably bad. If it's a good idea, somebody else already had it. I hope it's clear for everyone. There is no good original idea. And don't forget that being ahead of time is the same as being wrong. So if you think you have an idea but nobody else has it because you're way ahead of your time, that's not good for you, okay? So really think about this and don't be afraid of starting something that seems to already exist. It's a rather good sign. Another answer I hear a lot, developing a prototype takes time. I have a family, I have a rent to pay, I have a fridge to fill. All this takes a lot of time. All this takes money. And so time is money and all that. So yeah, indeed, developing a prototype takes time. I won't say otherwise, but the question is, do you really need to develop a prototype to start with? Do you really need to spend that much money? And I insist, even if you are a developer, the time that you spend on developing your prototype is cost of opportunity. While you're doing that, you're not doing something paying, okay? So don't make the mistake to hide that under the carpet and say, yeah, it's free. I'm a developer, I'm doing it myself, so it's free. No, it's not. Okay, so developing a prototype takes time. It is expensive, but you might not need it, and we'll talk about that later. Another answer I hear a lot, well, I don't have enough money aside. Because if developing a prototype takes time, the best way to take the time is just to quit your job for a few months, at least, and to work on it. But for that, you need some money aside, okay? And especially as you quickly realize, how many of you have pet projects on the side? Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So I'm sure you realize by now that pet projects are nice, but working on it on evenings and weekends is not really something. I mean, it's hard then to take the jump and, yeah, work on it full time. So we're going to see how this is not necessarily a problem. Another answer I hear a lot is I need market study and a business plan. That's the old way of creating startups. Less and less investors look at that, and it's actually a waste of time, a waste of energy, because those are documents and elements and data that are very hard to update, that are very hard to adapt, and yeah, very hard to follow. So many business plans end up in a drawer, never read, never adapted, never evolved, because they're not meant to be. And we're going to see some tools. Of course, Lean Startup helps with that as well. Another thing I hear a lot, I feel alone because I have some development skills, which is great power, by the way. It's something that a lot of wannabe entrepreneurs will envy you for, but it's not all. You know that to create a successful business, you need also some sales skills, some design skills, and if you don't have a big enough network, if you don't have enough partners, it can feel lonely. And let's face it, as developers, we're not the best networkers, usually. We're not exactly socializers, I mean natural socializers. So it might be a problem. Another thing, I'm not in the right place. I also gave this presentation in Paris, and I got a lot of that, even though Paris is quite big in terms of entrepreneurship. So again, the mythology says that you have to be in the Silicon Valley to be successful, to create a successful startup. And it's true, it's inspiring to see that. And if you have the occasion to go there, you can understand why there is such a mythology around it. But the truth is, what's more important than actually being in such a place is being in a place that you know, that you understand. Culture, market, all that, you have to understand it. And I know also plenty of people who went to the Silicon Valley and failed just because they didn't understand the American market. And even worse, the Silicon Valley market, which is very special in itself. Okay? So don't think you're not in the right place. What's important is to adapt your idea, not to what you think some other people far away might need, but to what you know and what you understand about your ecosystem. and again, the market is not ready, you're ahead of your time, think again. Okay? I'm going to go quickly over that because there's a lot of ground to cover after that. Another one that is very strong usually, what if it doesn't work? Fear of failure. This is really big in Europe in general. But think again, you're a developer. Have you seen the number of potential employers upstairs? Do you really think that if it doesn't work out, you're going to have a hard time finding another job? Even if you say that, yeah, I tried to create my own startup and I failed, okay, it doesn't look good on a CV, on a resume, but, I mean, come on. Does it take anything away from your developer skills? Don't think so. Just a little story, since 2011, yeah, I created 2 startups, 2 failed, but every time I failed, I just went back to consulting for a few months. Actually, now I've been doing it for a year. It's time to think again. But, and then I went back to it. And we can do that. It's a chance that we have. So here we are. You want to create your own product. You know that you have this great power. And you want to use it properly. You want to solve real problems, problems that speak to you. And yeah, you want to have an impact, leave a mark. And again, I really insist on that. Startup methodology is your worst enemy. Okay? So, time to say just a little more about who I am. I'm a software developer as well. I've been doing that for 11 years now. And I always wanted to create my own startup one day, but I wanted to acquire some real-world experience, to know how the world works, how the real adults behave. I don't know. I wanted to acquire some real-world experience. And it took me 5 years to feel comfortable enough to work for my own. First, as a consultant, as a freelancer consultant. And then, in 2011, I participated in the first startup weekend in Brussels. And that's where I was introduced to the lean startup tools. And it was a wake-up call for me, because before that, I always thought that entrepreneurship was more for business students, for MBAs and stuff. And you had to have those sales and pitch and business planning skills, otherwise you could not do anything. And actually, with Lean Startup was the first time I got into something that really made sense to my Agile mindset, more rigorous, more scientific, and yeah, I think for software developers it makes a lot of sense. How many of you are doing Agile, Scrum, Lean stuff? Yeah. So this will fit right in. You will really understand how it works. So yeah, 6 years ago, I was like you, I was hesitating. I was in my, what I call the golden cage, you know, good pay, good job. And it's hard to think, okay, I'm going to drop all that and start my own thing. So, why I'm here today is to propose a choice. Okay, either you take the red pill and you go back to your consulting life or your software factory life or whatever, or you take the blue pill and you follow me down the rabbit hole, and then we're going to explore another reality. No one leaving? Good sign. Okay, so the reality that I've experimented myself since 2011 is completely different from what I've described. Okay, all those fears, all those things that were holding me back, I figured out that they were not so real, and there were other challenges that I had not anticipated. A few other beliefs that I didn't know about. The first important thing, a startup is not a company. Boom. Let you meditate on that. No, a startup is really not a company. It is, by its very definition, a research project. a research project for a business model. Okay? That's the main difference between a startup and a starter, if you want. A starter, what I call a starter, is like opening a restaurant or a hairdresser's shop, stuff like that. The business model is known. You just have to adapt it to another location, find your customers, and replicate something that already exists. In a startup, you have to innovate in terms of how you make money, how you capture value, how you create value, the business model. That's the biggest thing. And finding that innovative business model is the mission of the startup. Actually, that's the real product. The software product that you want to build is just one part of it, and we'll come later to all that's around it. Okay? So a startup is not a company, it's a research project to find the business model for a company. And the day you have found this business model, the day you start to scale it up and replicate it in different areas, then you start to become a company. And it's a completely different adventure altogether. So, if a startup is not a company and it's a research project, your first objective is learning. It's not making as much profit as possible. It's not being rich tomorrow. Not even the day after tomorrow, sorry guys. It's really learning. Your currency, your wealth is in the knowledge and the understanding that you acquire about your market, about how it works, about the problems of your customers, and how you can solve them. So it's really a learning experience. It's almost an initiatic path somehow. And the thing is that if you really want to learn, you have to confront. So again, we're back to the question of should I keep my idea for myself, keep it a secret, not talk to others in case they might steal it. If you do that, you deprive yourself of this source of learning. Talking to people, explaining your idea is the best way to validate it, to verify your hypothesis, and yes, they are only hypotheses. Because let's face it, guys, you don't know anything about your market. You think you know, but don't forget you have your vision as a developer, as an engineer. It's a very specific vision. It's a very specific mental model. You need to understand the mental model of your customers in order to really build the product that they need. And yes, learning takes time, and it takes a really unpredictable time, and it's very risky. You don't know when you're going to learn enough to launch something that's profitable. Okay? So this kind of uncertainty that makes it really hard to find money, to find investments. So for now, at least for now, forget about fundraising. Free your mind. Okay? This is really critical that you think more about what you need to learn and the uncertainties that you need to remove before getting after money. Because the investors are all motivated by the same thing. They're all looking for the same thing, traction. And before getting traction, you need a product that solves a real problem for existing customers. Another very important fact, you don't need to build anything to validate. You don't need to develop software. So put your IntelliJ aside for a minute, or whatever environment you like to work in. Stop thinking about writing lines of code. I know it's very frustrating, but that's actually our poison. As developers, we can build. The minute we think of a solution, we can, okay, Maven, create, project, whatever. I don't know what you use again. I'm a Java developer. That shows. But yeah, we have this tendency to jump straight to the solution and start building it without taking a step back, understanding what's the real problem behind the solution that we are trying to create, and yeah, making sure that what we build is actually going to be needed. And there are plenty of examples of stories of startups who have developed something, launched it, okay, build it, and they will come 6 months after starting to work on this prototype. It goes out into the world, and nobody is there. Nobody buys. Nobody uses. Or some people register, and then they go. That's the worst thing that can happen. Not just for all the waste of time and money and energy, but just for your motivation. Again, motivation is really important for when you are an entrepreneur. So I'm going to show you some techniques, some tools that you can use to validate your hypothesis without actually develop anything. At some point, you're going to develop something, guys. Don't worry. But you have no idea how good it feels when you start building something and you know it's going to be useful. You remove some of the stress of, okay, are people going to use it? Are they going to use it like that? This is really, really, really gratifying. So yeah, put aside your solution ideas and come back to the problem. And don't forget that if you want people to pay for the solution that you're building, you need to solve a real problem, a big one. In terms of problems, we often differentiate between what we call mosquito bites and shark bites. Okay, mosquito bites are very frequent, but okay, you can live with it. Shark bites are very rare. They can hurt. And what you want to find is the sweet spot between the two, because a shark bite is very hard to sell. Okay, it's a huge thing, but it's very hard to sell. And a mosquito bite, well, people can live with it. So it's very hard to make them pay for it. So you need to find the right sweet spot between the two. And it's tough, and it takes time. And it's even tougher if you're in love with your idea. That's an important fact. And again, because of this myth of the $1 million idea and all that, once you have an idea, it's really hard to get rid of, or at least to adapt to the environment. So it's part of the humility that's really necessary. Again, time is not your enemy, waste is. Waste of time, waste of money, waste of energy. Everything that you do and doesn't end up increasing your learning, okay, bringing some new knowledge and understanding, is waste. And as you know, in software development, it's the same principle as lean software development. What you want to eliminate is waste. In software, waste is unused code, features that are developed and no one uses. In a startup, waste is all the time that you spend building something that nobody needs. Well, it's very similar. So, let's talk lean startup. Let's get into the real meat. How do you take all that into account and actually try to learn as much as possible, as fast as possible? In Agile methodologies, whether it's Scrum, Kanban, or any other, you always have this tool to try and visualize what's going on. In the lingo of Agile, it's called the information radiator. And in the lean startup, we also have this notion of an information radiator. What is this? It's a canvas. I'm insisting on it's a canvas because there are actually several variants depending on the methodology and the tools that you choose to use. This one is called the lean canvas. It's been designed by a guy called Ash Moria. In the book, he really formalized it in the book Running Lean, that I really recommend to you. It's a really good book. And it's really adapted to software startups. And this one is actually derived from another canvas called the business model canvas that's more adapted to existing business that you want to evolve and so on. So I find this one really adapted. So I choose to use this one, but you can find several variants. And basically what you can find in this canvas is all the elements that compose your business model in just a one-page view. Everything is in there, and having it in a one-page view forces you to be concise about it, okay, not to get into too many shenanigans, and it also makes it possible for you to adapt it as you move along. Again, learning how to design your business model is basically filling in the cells of this canvas and replacing hypothesis by validated learning, by stuff that you have validated on the ground somehow. Okay, and I'm going to talk about how you validate those. To go quickly over those cells, the numbers that you see are the one of the orders, I would advise you to follow something like that in terms of, the order in which it's interesting to do stuff. Start with the right side, customer segments. Customer segments is really understanding who your customer is. You can do customer persona. There are plenty of techniques to do that. But basically, the idea is that you need to understand who you want to solve a problem for. Okay? What's their life like? What are their criteria? And the important word in there is segment. Very often when you create a startup, you want to serve everybody in the world. And that's normal. Everybody wants that. Nobody wants, hey, I want just to satisfy those 3 guys there. It's going to be nice. No, of course, that's the interest of it. You want to have an impact as big as possible. But it's really interesting to start somewhere small. Again, your first objective is not to make a lot of money, is to make a lot of learning. And the best way to learn is what we call a niche market, so a small market, very accessible, that gives you a lot of feedback. The more diverse your customer segment, the more you mix experiments, the harder it is to get results. So you need to find your sample, your first sample to start with. It doesn't mean you're going to end there. It just means that you use that as a stepping stone to learn more and get to the next stage. Okay, so this is a living thing. It's going to evolve. Second aspect is the problem. So once you have thought of who your customer is or might be, it's interesting to think about what their problems are. And again, think shark bites versus mosquito bites, must-have versus nice-to-have. It's very rare that people are ready to pay for nice-to-have. Spying on your old high school girlfriend is a nice-to-have. That's why Facebook is not paying. But if you really want people to pay, you need to solve a must-have problem for them. And it's also interesting in this cell to think about existing alternatives. So how do people solve these problems today? And it might be with another product, or it might be with a workaround, or with a grandmother recipe, or whatever. It's always interesting to know what they are already using. For 2 reasons. First, because if it's already a paying solution, it will help you position yourself in terms of pricing, ultimately. And second of all, because sometimes they use a solution and they think it's just the best way. They don't think there is any other possible way, and that's where your opportunity lies. The third aspect is what we call the unique value proposition. That's the one in the middle. So once you have your customer segment, you have your problems, the first thing you can try is finding a sentence that will attract those customers because it speaks to them. Okay? Typically, that's the sentence that you put on your landing page, on the top of your website, the sentence that people use to determine if it's for them or not. If they're going to leave or stay on your website, give you their email address, for example, to be kept in the loop about the evolution. So this is really important because this is what you will use to answer the damn question, what's your startup about? And to test if it speaks to people. The fourth aspect, and it's only number 4, is the solution. So now you have this unique value proposition, you have your problems, you can start thinking of how am I going to solve those problems for those customers? How am I going to implement that unique value proposition in terms of features? So you can think, for example, of one feature for each problem. Just really keep it simple. Don't think that the number of features will determine how many customers you have. It's quite the opposite, actually. You need to find just the minimum features that are enough to convince people to use your solution. The fifth aspect is channels. So channels is both distribution and marketing channels. So how are you going to reach those customers that you have identified? Depending on who they are, it might be completely different. So that's also interesting to think ahead of time, because if those channels are just inaccessible to you, there's a problem there. So you might need to find partners. You might need to increase, extend your network somehow. So that's interesting. And then the two cells at the bottom. Revenue streams on the right and cost structure on the left. This is to do kind of a very simple profits and losses. So the idea here is that you evaluate how you can make money. And yes, you do need to make money. The freemium thing is an easy way to go, and you should start right away if your solution is really interesting, if your solution is really valuable, you should be able to get people to pay. So how much, how often, what structure, is it a subscription, is it a one-time fee, is it a license? There are plenty of ways to do it, and here you can start thinking in terms of, okay, how are people going to pay for that? And then on the left, you can start thinking of all your cost structure. So again, integrate your development in the cost structure. It's not for free. But also think of in terms of, okay, servers are not very expensive anymore these days, but you might need some to hire a sales guy or to do some marketing, search engine marketing or stuff like that. All that costs money, okay? Put it in that frame. And what's really interesting then is to use those two to try and see if your business model is viable somehow. Just try to see how many customers you would need to offset the cost on the left. It gives you a rough idea of, okay, is it doable or not? Again, this is just an estimation, an hypothesis at this point, and the point is to validate all that as much as possible before starting. And then there are the last two. Key metrics are an important aspect because that's how you're going to start measuring how good you're doing, okay? So it's really interesting to identify beforehand how you're going to measure your success. And it doesn't need to be a 1,000-line Excel sheet, just 2 or 3 metrics that are really interesting to track. And the last one is actually the hardest one to fill, especially at the beginning, what we call the unfair advantage. It's everything that makes it hard for anyone else to replicate what you're doing. Okay? So it can be patents, if you have some, but I mean, software patents, not really a thing in here. But it can be you have the network that nobody else has, or it can be you have a very deep knowledge of this industry that you want to disrupt, for example. Those are unfair advantages. But don't panic if you can't fill that in at the beginning. It's very hard anyway. It's something that you build as you move along. Okay? So this is your tool. I really encourage you, if that speaks to you, to print it in big format, to print 200 of those, 300 of those, anyway, and to display it somewhere visible, and to use post-it notes, because then it forces you to just write in a few words stuff. And then you keep it visible at all times, just like the Scrum board, just like the Kanban board, you keep it visible at all times, and you make it change as you learn stuff. Very powerful tool. So, based on that, your first objective is to find a triplet customer problem solution. That's the holy grail, okay? You need to find a real customer who has a must-have problem, something that you can sell a solution for, and of course you need to find the right solution. One important aspect here, when I say customer, I really mean people paying. Nowadays you see more and more business models that are platform models with customers and providers, but you can see them as customers as well, because in a sense they are paying, the Airbnb kind of stuff or the Uber kind of stuff. Again, the customer is the one paying. And the other side of the equation are the providers. Okay? So I really encourage you to use the canvas that we saw before, primarily focused on the customer. If you really want to evaluate all sides of the platform, you can, for example, use 2 colors of post-it notes, or you can just do 2 canvases for both sides. Based on that, once you have that, it's really important to explore qualitatively and validate quantitatively. What do I mean by that? very often when you think of market research, when you think of market studies, you think of surveys. Asking as many people as possible some questions in a Google form and gathering some stats and percentages to get the idea. There are several problems with that. First of all, it's only verbal feedback. It's very poor feedback. Okay, you don't see the reaction of people, you don't see their feelings, and these are incredibly valuable when you don't know anything. So the surveys are good for validating something that you already think you know, you just want to be sure. But when you are exploring something that you don't know at all, it's really important to not use surveys. And the other problem with surveys is that usually people answer questions that you ask, and that's it. So it's very easy to see most surveys are really biased, okay? The questions are asked a certain way. When you have multiple choice, the choices are really limited, and people just want to say other, and just give you more. But if they are too limited in the way they can answer, it's not going to work. And we're going to see how we can explore qualitatively. And based on that, on all that learning, what you want to reach is the infamous minimum viable product. Again, what we call by that, what this designates is really the minimum product that is enough to sell people. It doesn't mean that it's a final product. Actually, if you're not ashamed of your first version, you didn't release it soon enough. That's not from me, that's from a guy from LinkedIn. So it's really important that you think of the minimum set of features that is going to get you some users, some customers, and yeah, it's not the final one, it's just a starting point. And this, again, is not, the goal of this minimum viable product is not to make money, it's not to make profit, it's to learn again. And as you learn, you pivot. So pivoting is, again, a big word, and it's being used in all sorts of directions. Think of the physical meaning of pivoting. You keep a fixed point and you change something else. Pivoting is not spinning around. Then you get dizzy and you lose yourself and you don't know in which direction you're going anymore. So pivoting is really, you keep something stable and you change something else. Because obviously in the experiment something went wrong. Okay? For example, I have customers, I talk to them, I try to validate my hypothesis, and I realize that the problem I thought they had, they don't have it. But they have another one. So you keep the same customer, you change the problem. It can be the other way around. And at every stage, you can get this idea. And again, try not to change too many things at the same time, because then it's very hard to learn from that. It's basically like mixing scientific experiments. So pivoting, the goal of pivoting is to allow you to iterate. Again, a term that's very familiar to you if you are doing Scrum or Kanban, stuff like that. The goal is to iterate your product, your minimum viable product, until you reach another milestone, product market fit. That means that your product really solves a problem for a given market. Again, not your final market, but an interesting one nonetheless. So, those are the new beliefs, the new things that I wanted to get into your mind somehow. Now, how do we use those and put them into practice? What's the attack plan? The first thing I really advise you to do is an exercise of values, mission, and vision. Why is it important? Because, again, this adaptive, iterative approach makes it very easy to lose yourself, to lose your purpose and what you really want to meet. If you're just listening to everything around and just following the trend all the time, you get away from yourself. So this is really important to use as some kind of a safe beacon, a lighthouse. Okay? Whenever you have a decision to make, whenever you have a choice, a pivot to decide, it can be interesting to come back to, okay, who am I? Why do I want to do that? And what do I want to achieve in the big sense of the term? This is a really interesting thing to think about at the beginning. And usually those things don't change as you evolve. Okay? When I say vision, it's what you want to build yourself as a human being, as a developer, over the next 10 years. It's not the product that you're going to build. It's what you would like to do, okay? What you would like to bring into this world, basically. And the mission is really your life's mission. What do you think you were born for? It might sound like it's very theoretical and abstract and almost mystical, but it's really important to think about this. Once you have that, you could, again, display it somewhere, visible, just to keep it in mind. And you can start listing your potential targets. Again, the key aspect with customer segments is to cut it down into pieces. At first, you will want to satisfy everybody or all the men in the world. Okay, that's already 50% cut. Okay, all the men between 20 and 30. Okay, we're getting somewhere. But you really need to clarify stuff and get to more precise niche markets. Okay, so think in broad terms and then try to specialize it. And don't be afraid of reducing the size of your market. Again, what you want is to maximize learning. So once you have listed and brainstormed all these potential targets, you can pick 3 of those. And there, you can use your gut feeling. Use your intuition. Which ones look the most promising, look like they're the most interesting? You just get to start somewhere. It doesn't mean that your final customer will be one of those, but it's just a way to start. Okay? And for each of those 3, you can draft a canvas. So you use one of the, for example, the lean canvas that I showed you earlier, and you try to fill in the cells. Again, these are just hypotheses, okay? There is no certainty, there is no validation until you've actually gone out of the building and tried something, okay? But it's really interesting to start with what you think you know. Once you have drafted a canvas for each of those 3 customer segments, there's a little bit of data magic here to try and order them by 4 different criteria in that order. Okay, so you can do a matrix, customer segments on the top, criteria on the left, and you weight them. 4 for pain levels, 3 for accessibility, 2 for financial means, and 1 for number. Notice that number is the last one. It's the least important one. The first one is the pain level. Again, what you really want is that customers have a real must-have issue with I mean, they really must have the solution that you bring to the problem. Okay? It must be closer to a shark bite than to a mosquito bite, in other words. The second aspect is accessibility. So how easy it is for you to find people in that customer segment. The third aspect is financial means of your customer. Okay? How likely are they to pay? Little hint, students, usually not good in that area. But because I see a lot of people who want to create startups for students anyway. And the last one is number. Okay? So you crunch some numbers, and again, it's just your gut feeling. It's just what you think at this point. But the goal is just to find the first one in that order and to validate the customer problem. At this stage, one of the most efficient tools that I've seen is customer interviews. I know it might be scary for some people who are not very comfortable going to others and asking questions and yeah, trying to understand how they feel and what their problems are, but that's really, really, really powerful stuff. And that's one of the ways that you can validate a lot of stuff, a lot of hypotheses, without building any single line of code. So there are ways and techniques to craft those interviews, to try and ask the right questions and get as much data as possible. And not just verbal feedback, but also feelings and non-verbal feedback. And keep an open mind, open question at this stage. trying to understand what their problems are. Sometimes you're going to suggest the problems that you think they have, but they will suggest others that you had not thought about because you don't know how they work. So it's really interesting. Once you have found your customer and your problem, then only you can start thinking of a solution. But wait, no development environment yet. When I say think of a solution, I mean design a solution. It can be as simple as just drawing something on a piece of paper and showing it to people to see how they would interact with it, what their feedback is about it. And again, you can do customer interviews, you can do prototyping, you can do landing pages with just a video showing the concept. There are plenty of ways to validate that without building a single line of code. And again, same principle. The goal is to find, so you already had your customer problem and you need to complete the triplet with your solution. So you iterate. Once you have that, then you start designing and building your MVP. That's the moment that you can start coding. And by the way, that's the moment that you can also quit your job. Because as you noticed, I didn't talk about quitting your job anytime before. And everything that you've done up to this point gets you enough learning, gets you enough validation, reassures you enough about your market to really go to the next step. And at this point, you know that what you build is going to be useful to someone. So, on that note, will you fail less with Lean Startup? Actually, no. My point is you will fail more. You will fail more often. You will fail smaller, and you will learn more from your failure. That's what Lean Startup really is about. Because you can fail and learn nothing, and that's the worst thing that can happen to you. What you want is to multiply the experiments and learn as much as possible from each of them. Okay? And the last word I wanted to have for you is, in any case, don't forget you are not alone. There are plenty of software developers who want to create their own startup and who are trying to understand how this all Lean Startup works. I created this Slack, so you can go to ls4dev.com and you can join the Slack channel, the Slack group. There are already a few people from the Paris conference on there, but we can create some channels for English speakers as well. And the goal is to share the experiments that we do, to ask questions, to help each other, and to create a community of software developer entrepreneurs. That's it for me. Thank you.